What a way to start after a couple weeks off. It's
been like a month.
It's the 18th of December right now.
It's the 20th.
Yeah, dude. My schedule's been so sauced up just after gun season with all the work and traveling I've been doing. And I'm leaving tomorrow. Ellie and I are going to Kentucky. Ironically, Ben just showed up to Wisconsin. And unfortunately, instead of him and I being able to ice fish for a couple days this week, I'm going to Kentucky for a family Christmas at Ellie's family. So I'll be gone all of next week.
Sorry, guys. My mother was calling me, wondering if I'm going to be home for dinner.
Yeah, those are good phone calls.
Not used to having kids back in the house.
Isn't that a weird thing? We're at that stage where, like, you don't even know it yet, but 10 years from now, you're going to have your own kids. And,
yeah.
And they're going to be grandparents. And
yeah.
It's like, oh.
They'll be coming to our place for the holidays instead of us going there. Yep. But, yeah, so I'm up here. You're going down there.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll ice fish next Sunday, or maybe New Year's Day.
Yeah, I'm gonna. So you are gonna stay through New Year's?
I think so. We'll see, but I think so.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm psyched to do some ice fishing.
I'm not.
Really?
Like, if I didn't ice fish, I want to go at least once just because, like, I know it will be fun, but I'm just not really that jacked up for it. I'm kind of still in hunting mode.
I'm over hunting. That's crazy that we're at two different
I
stages.
think what happens for me, so, like, we'll recap our gun season here in a minute, and, like, because we had some action this year, but I think what happens for me, I've never been a late season hunting guy. Like, I've muzzleloader hunted a handful of times. I've late season bow hunted a handful of times, like through maybe the 15th of December. And like, once it gets past that, I'm out. And I think it's because I'm like, normally it's miserable in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
To hunt past December 1st, but for sure past like December 15th is normally pretty brutal.
Yeah, it was freezing. I did sit in a tree yesterday night. And we only sat for about an hour and 15 minutes, but it was cold.
Who'd you sit with?
I filmed one of my coworkers who were testing out some new gear.
Oh.
For Nested coming out this next year. We went on a quick late season hunt, which I want to dive into that after we do this because there's a whole fucking story to this, what happened yesterday, but I'll get into it.
Yeah, but so I think that normally plays a factor in it. And then like, normally I'm excited to ice fish because I know I can do it all year. Like, buddies are always home around Christmas, whatever. And this year, I think, like, a combination of one, like, living in Kentucky now, their weather now is like our mid to late November is. Like, it's really not that brutal. Like, you know, we still have days that are getting up into the 40s. And then, like, knowing I can't ice fish, I think that's kept me in hunting mode longer because, like, I just hunted last weekend, and like I was telling you, like, I almost stayed so I could hunt this weekend. Mm-hmm. But
I guess I had that when I lived in Missouri. I mean, I lived there 2 years, but only one winter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, like, I didn't really miss it because it was warm during the wintertime, but I did look forward to, we took a guy's trip where I flew out to North Dakota and met the guys that drove out there and just did, like, a 5-day trip. And I was like, that suffice for me. Like, we caught a bunch of fish, we hung out, and had a good time. And, yeah, that's weird because I really, like, never really thought about it. But I was also deer hunting in December because it was, you know, December 15th, it's 50 degrees. And I'm like, there's nobody else in the woods.
Yeah, I'm not passionate about fishing like I am hunting. Like, I enjoy it. It's fun. But I don't have the drive to do it. Like if I had to move somewhere where it's like, okay, you can't hunt, like, I would go nuts. If I had to move somewhere where it's like, okay, you can't fish, I'd be like, oh, that kind of sucks, but doesn't really change that much for me.
You play golf or something else to fill that void.
Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. But, I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoy it, going out and sitting in the shack and catching fish, but that's the other thing. I'm not that good of a summer fisherman. Like, I mean, I know what I'm doing. I'm not, like, strategic like a lot of these guys. I'm not going out and catching 15 largemouths in a day. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then ice fishing is just so much fucking work.
Yeah, and it's cold on top of that.
Yeah. So. And I'm more of a go sit in the shack, have it be as much about drinking beer with your friends as it is about catching fish.
I'm the
Whereas
opposite.
I know you're the exact opposite. You won't sit in a shack if it's 5 degrees out.
No, I feel like I need to be hopping around and chasing fish. Like I went ice fishing.
I just don't have that.
We went to Big Round the other day, and first time on that lake, just kind of went out there blind. I get to the boat launch, and Dad gets out, Waylon gets out, I get out. My dad's like, "Hey Gabe, throw me my coat." I'm like, "Oh yeah, good idea." So I throw him his coat, lift up the coat, and I look in the back of the truck, and I'm like, "Ah shit, I don't have a coat." So I'm wearing bibs, a t-shirt, and a fucking sweatshirt, and it's 12 degrees with 30-mile-an-hour winds out of the southeast. The boat landing is on the very northwest side of the lake, and the lake is 3 miles across. Like, no wind block, and we only fished, and we walked out probably half mile, but still, like, fucking, in the video I'll post it here this weekend, you can just see the fucking wind is whipping. I've never been so cold. But at the same time, just like I stuck it out, just fucking I want to fish. I don't even own a shack anymore. I work at an ice fishing place that makes a bunch of different types of shacks, and I had one. I sold it because I'm like, I don't really have anything to haul it out. That's the problem. Is like I don't really fish where it's like an easy walk. In the year that we had the snowstorm, where Stadola's, Waylon, and you and I went up north.
That sucked.
And we walked out 200 yards, and it took 15 minutes to make the walk. It's 2 feet of snow, slush, trying to pull a heavy shack. Like, that ice fishing trip, that day, made me sell my shack. Because I'm like, I would rather just carry a tiny sled, a pail, and as light as possible, because I'm always walking. I don't own a four-wheeler. I tend to not like to drive my truck on the ice. We haven't been able to in the last 2 years. So I just travel light.
When I was a freshman in high school, Ethan and I were snowmobiling,
mm-hmm.
and we had a winter like that. No, sorry, I think I was in 8th grade. It was that winter, if you remember that winter, we got a shit ton of snow. Okay. You would have been a freshman.
Yeah, like, the winter 2013, the one that killed all the deer.
Yeah, crazy amount of snow.
Yep.
So, like, snowmobiling was so fun that winter, and we went back in this little bay on Rice Lake, and it did that, where,
mm-hmm.
like, the amount of snow that we had was so heavy, it was pushing the ice down, bringing water up, and creating slush, and he got his snowmobile stuck in that shit.
God, dude.
And it was like 0 degrees that day, and it took us like over an hour. Neither one of us had rubber boots on. We're just standing in the water.
My God,
like, it was miserable. And then, once we got it out, his track was all frozen up, because it had gotten all wet. It was so brutal. So, anyways, we should probably get to what we're actually going to talk about, which is gun season.
Yeah, so when you drove up to Wisconsin, I took out my wife, and she ended up getting her first buck.
Yeah, that's a good story.
It was a really good buck, too.
Yeah, it was a really good buck.
So you drove up, and we're like, all right, opening weekend, hunting with the family, gun season tradition like we talked about on the last podcast. Did it go the way you thought it would go?
Yeah, it did.
No.
So Saturday morning, woke up, obviously got in our stands, everybody's excited. And I'm like, I'm going to sit all day. So I'm sitting and I'm seeing just a pile of deer, but all does for the most part. Sorry, let me backtrack. It was one of those mornings, I was sitting on a food plot, and it was one of those mornings where there was enough light. And it was breaking light just enough. It was like 15, 20 minutes before light when I got in my stand. And immediately I pulled my binoculars up. And I couldn't tell if he was a shooter or not, but big buck at like 60 yards. Nothing I could do. It was like 16 minutes before legal.
Yeah.
And after that, saw a pile of deer. I think I saw maybe like a fork buck and mostly does. And so at 10 o'clock maybe, I hear a shot, and I'm like, that had to be my brother. So I text him, and I'm like, did you shoot? And he goes, yep, dead. And so this was his first buck. So I'm excited. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I'm texting him, and I'm like, is it big? And he's like, I honestly couldn't tell. It was a decent buck. I'm terrible at judging. Like, I was excited, so I shot it. I'm like, okay, well, as long as you're excited, that's cool. And so I got down at 11. We met up with him, went and got his buck. Wasn't as big as he thought, but it was a nice 8-pointer. Cool first buck, whatever. So we get it back, gut it, hang it. and it's like 12:15, and I'm like, I'm going back to my stand. So I go back to my stand, and I'm sitting. From the time I got in my stand, I had deer in front of me. There were deer in the food plot when I got in my stand. And all of a sudden, this buck comes out. And I don't know where he came from. Like, all of a sudden, he was just in the food plot. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I'm glassing him. I'm like, oh. I'm like, boy, he's a pretty good one, but I think he's 3.5, like, probably 130-inch 8-pointer. Like, I've posted multiple pictures of him on BC Squared, on Facebook or Instagram and TikTok. Like,
it was a good buck.
He was a really good buck, but I'm like, he's gonna be a giant next year. I'm like, I should probably pass him. So I passed him. Stood in front of me for 45 minutes. I had to watch this buck. Comes from like 100 yards into like 80, then into like 60. Like, I mean, I could have shot him 100 times probably. And so finally he gets down, or he leaves, and my brother was going to come sit with me since he didn't have a tag. So he's like, I'm on my way, and it's like 2:50 at this point. I'm like, okay. So he gets in my stand right at 3 o'clock, and I'm literally no more than telling him about how many deer I had seen and how maybe I should have shot that buck. I don't know. Like, you know, maybe he wasn't one that you pass, and all of a sudden this buck comes out, and I go, Braden, there's a buck. And I pull my glass up, my binoculars, and I mean, they weren't on my face for 5 seconds. And I'm like, yep, I'm shooting him. And mind you, my brother wasn't in the stand for 5 minutes at this point. And I shot him, and he ran out of the food plot down this hill. And as soon as they leave the food plot, you can't see him. No. By the time, like with the recoil, by the time I got my gun down, he was already out of the food plot. I think my brother was more nervous than I was. He was watching me instead of watching the deer. So neither one of us, I'm like, hold felt good, like sounded like I hit him, but it was a 150-yard shot. Like, don't know. So we gave it 15 minutes and got down and walked over and couldn't find blood. And I'm shooting a 7mm Rem mag with 168 grain bullets. Like,
blowing holes in deer.
Yeah. So I'm like, shit, that's not good. And all of a sudden I walked over to the edge of the food plot, and he didn't go 20 frickin' yards. He was piled up. So it was cool. He was a really good buck. We think he's either 4.5 or 5.5. My biggest buck so far. So yeah, it was pretty awesome. And then Gabe and I got to sit together once. I sat a couple more times, but yeah. So it definitely went the way I thought it did. It was nice to at least put my tag on something, because the rest of the year had been a bit of a grind. So
my gun season didn't quite go the way.
Well, tell Ellie's story and then tell yours.
I was gonna say, like, just overall our experience, like, it kind of went how I expected. As far as we're hunting public, we're gonna be just trampled by people. But I also was hoping just for seeing more deer. But anyways, we go to a public spot. I bow hunted. There was a lot of good deer in there. I put up a ladder stand for Ellie. I got permission from the landowner to go do it. We get out there, and some guy's got his truck parked in the field with a ice shack, and there's 2 guys sitting in there, truck running at like well before first light. I'm like, okay, well, at least these guys are here. I'm going in the woods. We get in the woods. It cracks legal light. We look on the trail. All of a sudden, I see a freaking guy with his headlamp still on, wobbling in like Elmer Fudd. Sits down 100 yards from us. I'm like, great. Look over to my left. There's a guy in a ladder stand like 150 yards up the hill. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Look down to the hill onto the private that I have permission for, but apparently so does everybody else. And it was like the Orange Army. It looked like a prison yard where they just walk with their guns and they kind of walk slowly and just patrol the perimeter. Yeah. That's what they were doing to this. And it's big ag fields. Like, they're just walking the fields. And it's 8 in the morning. Like, why are you sitting on a field in the morning for the most part? Like, I guess some people do, but I'm like, I don't. You're on a food plot, though. Like, and there's no pressure. Like, this piece gets pounded. There's not going to be...
That's true.
And all of a sudden, like, they start unloading, like, 5 shots, 7 shots, 9 shots. So I start filming the last 5 shots, and they had already shot 4. And I'm like, oh, my goodness. Up from the frickin' field comes running up a fawn, and it passes Ellie and I at, like, 80 yards, and we watch it, we film it, and I'm like, I'm like, maybe they were shooting at the fawn, or maybe they shot its mom, but whatever it is, like, they were shooting. And this deer stopped up there, kind of looked down and brushed it off and just kind of ate acorns on the trail. Walked into the bedding area. I get a Snapchat from one of my buddies over in Polk County, and he was telling me that morning, like, he got in early, walked into public, was the only one there, was super jacked. And then he said he had like 20 headlamps come walking by him, and there's people shooting all over. So he sends me a snap at like 8:30. And I turned the volume all the way up, because at this point I think Ellie and I's hunt is over. Like, we're surrounded by guys all over. Just so much scent in the woods, so much noise, people walking around. Play the Snapchat.
Never know.
And he's up there, like, on my phone, loud, like, full volume, cussing, like, I'm already in the truck, fucking hate Wisconsin, dumbest state ever, too many goddamn hunters. And I'm like, yes, like, come on, fuel my fire. This is the reason I hate this state for hunting. And this video's playing full volume, and I look up over top of my phone, and coming in at like 80 yards is this freaking buck, and I'm like, oh, it's a good one. So I'm like, Ellie, big buck, and she was watching my phone, and she was calm for the most part, like, just while we were hunting. As soon as I said big buck, she starts doing like this thing, like, where? She's like, oh, I see him. I start filming. This buck comes in, stops, looks at us, sees us in the tree. I'm like, you gotta shoot him, it's over. Does like a little tail flick, puts his head back down, and starts coming closer. I'm like, no fucking way. Deer gets to 40 yards, and she's like, stop him. And I didn't even get the chance to say, Matt, and she wailed this deer. And it ran closer to us, did like a 360, fell over, got back up, and had the wobbles. And she didn't like cry, but she was like, oh, Gabe, shoot it, put him down, like, you know, because she didn't want to watch the animal struggle. So, like, while she's saying that, I'm like, Ellie, just shoot it again. And she's like, okay. And next thing you know, I feel something touch my leg. And I look down, there's a fucking gun barrel in my leg. I'm like, don't shoot. And this is all on video. You can hear it. So I grabbed the gun from her. The deer's just, at this point, laying down with his head up. Like, he was going to die, but he was kind of flopping around. So I just put it between his shoulders, pulled the trigger, and he dropped his head. It was done. He would have died 30 seconds later anyways if I wouldn't have shot him. But so, bunch of people. Somehow she shot her first buck. And this is, you know, we're on public. She's shooting her first buck. I almost get shot by my wife, you know, and we're on a mentored hunt. So it's like a learning process, right? Like, anybody else, I probably would have, like, had a stern talking to her. I told her, I'm like, just always, she's like, I wouldn't have shot your leg. And I'm like, right. Like, I would have been out without an Achilles, you know. So she wants to get down right away. I told her I wanted to wait another half hour so I could shoot one. So she handed me the gun. We hunted. People start walking around, you know, I'm like, whatever. So we go find this deer. Awesome. Like, it's a fairly good framed 8-pointer.
He's a really nice buck.
It was wide, good mass, short
northern
tines.
public land, and a great first buck.
I taped him out at 114, some change. But, I mean, he's got the frame of my 10 on the wall.
He's wide as shit. He just doesn't really have much for tine length.
Yeah, he was like 18 and something, some change inside. Had really good mass, just short tines. But, I mean, anyway, so she was excited. Then we have to walk out to the truck because we got to, like, decide if we're getting the game card or if we're just going to go, you know, do what we did last year. Because it's like, when she shot her doe, it was the same spot. The deer ran the same way. This deer did the exact same thing. Get out to the field, walk past the two guys in the shack, talk to them. None of them wearing orange. And they're like, oh, did you shoot? And I'm like, yeah, she got her first deer. And then, you know, he got all excited. He's like, oh, yeah, you got any pictures of it? I was like, yeah, I showed him. And he was like, congratulations. And the old man in there was like, hey, congrats on your first buck. Then we walked down the field another 100 yards, and there's it's a Radix, like, soft-sided tower blind. And I know walk by it. Yeah. And I look up in there, and there's 3 guys sitting in the freaking blind. Like, 100 yards from these other guys shooting at this.
Circle jerk.
When they'd be shooting at what would be the same deer. And they're like, oh, did you shoot? And she's like, yeah, I got my first buck. And all excited. Like, they said it right away as if they were mad. But when she piped up, like, their attitude changed. And they're like, oh, like, congrats, blah, blah, blah. We're like, yep. We're going to go drag it out, but because all you guys are here, you know, there's 5 of you guys here, we don't walk back in front of you. And he looks at me, he's like, wait, there's other people? I'm like, yeah, you don't see the big truck and trailer sitting down the field edge? And they start looking out, they're like, no, we can't see it from here. I'm like, oh my God. Like, and they would have never known because if they walked in the dark, would have never seen that guy in his truck and trailer. I'm like, so there's 5 people, 100 yards apart, shooting at the same deer on the field edge. Anyways, get back to the truck. We get the deer taken care of. It was all good. And then the next morning, I decided to go in solo into some public, into the Blue Hills.
The old skyscraper story.
And I crawl in, and I had a fawn or a nubby buck, like
now,
100 yards.
If you're listening to this is a good story. This is a once-in-a-lifetime buck Gabe got himself in front of here. So, tune in now.
So I'm sitting I crawled up, packed in my nested system, sitting in a tree, and I had a nubby buck at like the first hour kind of eating acorns. He disappeared. It's 8 o'clock, then it's 9 o'clock, and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of getting cold, like nothing's moving, but I'm like, there's nobody else in this woods. Like for the second day of season, like I'm left alone. I'm just going to sit it out a little bit. 9:30, I'm facing the tree. I look up the hill and I see a flash of a deer, and I'm like, all right, here we go. Throw up the scope, and this deer's coming right at me. I'm like, oh, it's got a good body. And then I see a rack, and I'm like, oh, he's got big beams, just like really high up on his head. Like, this could be a good buck. Puts his head down, keeps walking in. I'm like, this deer's got no fucking tines. Like what? So I'm looking at this morphodite of a buck, and it starts coming in. It's like 60 yards coming closer. I'm like, okay, it's got a fork. Maybe it has a brow tine. I'm like, so I'm thinking about it. I'm like, we were gonna do drives the second week of gun season, but all the guys in the group chat had left, so I was on the fence of whether we're gonna have drives or not. And I thought to myself, if we do drives and I see this type of deer or this deer, I'm gonna shoot it. So I might as well shoot it now. So like, the one of those where you don't get worked up at all. It's just like almost target practice. This deer's at 20 yards, quartering towards walking. I go, man, he stops. Boom. This freaking deer bulldozes and dies in front of me at 10 yards.
Well, and you didn't really know what you shot.
No, I knew
his
it
brows
had
are
good
kind of, or his
beams.
main beams are kind of like turned up on his head. So
yeah, like he looked tall, but I knew he didn't have much for tying. So I'd call my dad from the tree, and Dad's like, "Oh, what'd you shoot?" And I'm like, "I don't know. He's a fork or a 5 or a 6. Maybe he's an 8." I get down to him, and I look at this fucking deer, and I'm like, he's a fucking 3-pointer. Like the world's biggest 3-pointer. This thing had like 3.5-inch mass measurements. It had 15.5-inch long beams. It had like a 3-inch fork, and the other side was just a beam in a brow.
we scored him at like 72 inches, and he's got 3 points.
72 and 4/8 with 3 scoreable points. Like,
So tell him about how he got his name. Tell him the next part of the story.
So I leave the public spot, and after I got Ellie helped me drag this thing out. She met me in the woods, which was awesome. Wife material. I got it out, and I hanged a nutsack. Mind you, this deer's like 220 pounds. It's a fucking unit. Hanged the nutsack on the gate, and I took a video for TikTok, and I'm like, nutsack on the gate so everyone knows I'm here. Went viral instantly, like 300,000 views overnight. I look at the comments, and somebody's like, named the spot. He's like, oh, is this such and such in this county? And I'm like, crap. So delete the comment, message this guy. And I'm like, how did you know? And he's like, oh, I live right there. We own the neighboring property. So he starts messaging me, and he's like, I'm just curious to know which buck you shot. We got 2 really big bucks we've been after. Just want to know if you shot one of them. And I'm like, probably not, unless your buck looks like this. Send him a picture. And I can see the typing, like the bubble pop up. And he hits me back, oh, you shot Skyscraper. We've had that deer on camera for the last couple of years. Bad genetics. Good kill, though. And I'm like, I shot a deer with a fucking name? Are you kidding me? They called it Skyscraper because it's just one of those deer. And
if you're curious what this buck looks like, go look at Gabe's profile picture on Instagram.
Yeah, dude, like it doesn't do it justice. Like I showed.
No, if they've had pictures, that deer had to be 3.5 at least.
At least, like it was a big bodied deer, and
his hooves were all worn down, and
he was just.
His
and for
teeth
somebody
were
to tell
worn
me that
down.
they've had him on camera for a couple of years, like whether he's 3, 4, or 5, like you get out into the Blue Hills. Granted, we weren't super far from ag. Like there is some ag fields, but like I don't know. It's a unique case where like. Is there really just cases of that bad genetics? Or did that deer get shot like 2 years ago and just like...
That's the thing. He could have got hit by a car. He could have got gored at one point. Like,
yeah, and I'm... So...
Was his nutsack okay?
No, his nutsack was fine. It was big, dude. He had big balls. But it was like... Big body. And I took it to Louis to drop off and get processed. I didn't want to mess with it. I dropped the tailgate, and the kids are like, well, that's a big deer to not have much antlers. And I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. I'm like, it had the same mass as Ellie's deer. It just didn't score, hardly anything. But
I don't care,
dude.
If you guys could see this deer, like, I've got a picture of it next to one of the Euro mounts Gabe has on his wall of, like, your very typical 8-pointer. Like, a buck we all would have killed to shoot growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is that,
It's like
510-inch 8-pointer?
Yeah, that's probably.
But he's a solid deer. He's not very wide, but he's got solid tine length. I've got a picture of Skyscraper next to this deer, and they're both the same width. Like,
and the same mass.
Similar beam length, like
just no tines, nothing, dude. Just a good deer to get out of the herd, as the neighbors say.
Yeah.
Stop him from breeding. And
But his main beams too, like, you know how most come to like a point at the end?
Yeah.
His were like a club.
Yeah, they were like bladed out. They were literally clubbed. It looked like he was part moose.
Oh my gosh, that is funny.
So we all punched tags this year. Ben punched his buck tag. Ellie punched hers. She thinks hunting is too easy. She told me that because she sat twice now in her life and killed a deer both times. I shot a buck, and then we attempted to do deer drives the rest of the week, and we only had 4 people show up. But we kicked out deer every sit, but nobody got shots off, and that was honestly the end of my bow season up until yesterday.
Oh, that's right. You wanted to tell this story. Yeah, let's hear it.
So originally I was going to have a week-long photo shoot, fly in a team of content people, because we're launching some big new SKUs for next year. The product testing kind of didn't go the way we thought it was, and we're like, all right, instead of launching this next year, let's make sure the product is right and just delay it, so I canceled the photo shoot. But we still have some other products that are good to go, so I was just going to go hunt twice. Like with 2 of our engineers, just go on a hunt, take pictures, take photos, just so we have, some content. So yesterday night, it had just snowed 3 inches up here all morning. The snowstorm just got done, and I was telling Jeremy, I'm like, this could be a good night, like post-storm, like there's going to be deer coming to this cut cornfield. And we were on public. And we get to the parking lot, and it's late. Like, he didn't get off work till 2. Mind you, it's dark by like 4:30.
Yeah.
And we pull up to the parking lot at 3. As soon as we get out, I'm out there, with a camera taking pictures, having him get ready, stuff on the tailgate. Side by side, flies out of the house that owns the property and put it into public. Drives by us on the road, does a U-E, flies back behind us. And I'm like, well, that's weird. I wonder if he was just wondering what we were doing, saw we were hunting, and on with his own business. So I'm still taking photos. All of a sudden, I hear this guy rip back, and he pulls in behind me. And I hear, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, let's go talk to him. And he sees me with a camera. So I put the camera down, and I was like, no, we're going on a hunt. He's like, what's the camera for? And I'm like, oh, we're launching these like new products that we have, trying to get some content for next year. I work, blah, blah, blah. I told him my story, and he's like, oh, okay. You guys are going deer hunting? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, well, I own the property right over here, so if you shoot one and it goes in there, feel free to go get it. And I'm like, okay, but he was like being almost like passive aggressive. Like, he was mad, but he was trying to be courteous.
Yeah.
And he's like an old Jerry. Like, he was like upper 50s, maybe 60s, big guy wearing bibs in his side-by-side. I'm like, okay, we'll do, like, but we're late, so we got to get going. He's like, all right, so, have fun. We finish getting ready. I slam the tailgate. He drives off, and he starts going down the road, gets about 60 yards, and we hear the freaking brakes lock up, and it goes, like mumbling. Sounds like the freaking guy from the water boy, the coach, just like that's what he sounded like. So I'm like, now what? Flies back in, and he's like, you guys are late. Like, why are you going hunting right now? You only got an hour left. I'm like, I know, that's why we're trying to go. And he's just like, are you sure you guys are out here hunting? I'm like, yes, we're out here hunting. Now he's switched his attitude. Like, he's mad. And he's like, let me see your license plate. And I'm like, okay. So it was covered in snow. So I flicked it off, and I didn't even say that. I just looked back at him and like did like, here you go. So he pulls out his phone, snaps a picture, and he's like, you guys are really going to go, like, in the corner back there? You're going to go in the corner back there and go hunt? I'm like, yeah, we're going to go in the corner back there and go hunt. He's like, all right. And then he flies out of there, so we haul ass and get to the corner. And all of a sudden, like, from his house, all of a sudden I see, like, lights of the side-by-side. The fucker drives, like, through the woods just to fuck with us. I'm like, this guy. So we ended up going, like, another 100 yards down the field, which is where I wanted to go anyways. Got set up in a tree, rubs all over the place, deer sign all over. There wasn't any tracks. It was just snowed that morning. Got up in the tree. We only ended up seeing 2 deer, but it was, like, the most weird experience with somebody. Like, you put your land into public. And then you're telling me that if I shoot one, I, like, no issue, go drive and get it. And then 30 seconds later, your bipolarness kicks in. And you're like, you know what? I fucking really don't want you here. Let me see your license plate. I'm like, am I going to come back? My tires are going to be slashed?
Yeah.
Like some, whatever this guy's name is. I know who he is now, but...
that's funny.
I'm like, just, like...
Well, work on him to hunt as private next year.
Well, no, it's his land is in public.
All in public?
Yes, his land is in VPA.
He made it sound like some of it was in private, some was in...
Well, and that's
public.
why that's what we talked about. We're like, does he even know that his land is public? Like, does he remember putting it in the program? Like, it's clearly stated. There's signs out there. We did the photo shoot there.
I was asking... the first time I did a photo shoot?
Yeah, well, that's the same property we went and hunted.
I thought that was a piece Levi had private permission on.
No, that was... No. Where you and I sat opening a bow last year... on my private across the road.
Oh.
The public across the road. Where we ended up talking to those guys in the side-by-side. And we ended up having a beer with those guys.
Okay, so
we went to the east side of the road there.
Gotcha.
And went all the way in that corner.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm like, this guy, like... Maybe he thought he only put this chunk of land in the public and didn't realize it's all in the public, but it's been public for the last 3 years, so...
Yeah.
But I don't know, it was one of those where it was a weird feeling.
That's what my grandpa said, though, so I asked him, because he used to own where I first went rifle hunting, like, when I was old enough to actually have a tag, was up just north of Cumberland. And he didn't buy that until, like, the 90s, so I was like, Grandpa, where'd you hunt, like, before that? And he's like, well, this guy by the name of so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, did you have permission? And he goes, that wasn't a thing back then. He goes, you just went and hunted. He's like, nobody questioned anybody. He's like, you just went and
nobody
just
had trail
hunted
cameras
somewhere.
And nobody was really trophy hunting.
Well,
either.
and he's like, people didn't care.
Yeah.
Like, you either hunted or you didn't, and you just picked somewhere you thought was good and went and hunted.
Man, if I could take the knowledge I have of deer hunting and go back 40 years ago,
I know.
I bet we could have some booners on the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. They'd also go and buy land in Buffalo County for $400 an acre.
Right. Yeah. Different times. So, being as though you killed 2 deer this year, 2 bucks.
$2, 2 does.
You killed 2 does?
I think so.
You shot the one through the ear.
I shot the one through the ear. No, I didn't. Just the one doe, because I was going to say we have 4 deer total.
Yeah.
Because I shot a doe, I shot a bow buck, I shot a gun buck, and Ellie shot a bow buck.
So being as though you got Ellie her first buck, you killed 2 bucks, and I killed a buck, and I know how I would answer this question. Do you feel like your season was a success or a failure?
My season was a failure, and I thought about that. I knew you were going to ask that question. My season is a failure to me because of the expectations I had. I aspired to kill big deer, and after I hunt, and I hunt, and I hunt, and I don't, like, I'm not seeing, I haven't even had trail camera pictures of a caliber of deer that I wanted to hunt. I haven't had personal encounters with the deer I wanted to shoot. Is ended up why I shot that buck November 1st, even though after I shot that deer, I kind of had, like, I wouldn't want to say I had tag regret. Like, I'm glad I filled the tag. I don't feel guilty about it, but it's like, I want to shoot big caliber deer. And you can't do that if you fill your tag on little deer. And I thought back to it, I'm like, I hadn't punched my bow tag in almost a decade in this state. I think it was 8 years for my archery buck. And I'm glad I shot the deer.
You had a couple struggles, too, with, like, sealing the deal, which I have, too. I just had one not that long ago. So I think to kill that one and, like, have it be a clean kill was probably a good confidence boost for you.
And I'd been to North Dakota twice, didn't tag out. I went to Kansas after I shot that deer, had a terrible, just hunting experience trying to get on big deer. The worst part is for me is because I work in the hunting industry, I always compare myself to the people I know. And these people are killing big deer. I know a lot of guys that do it on public land, killing big deer. I get a lot of partners and buddies that are killing booners on their, private farms and stuff like that. In the back of my head, though, is that nobody's doing it where I live. Like, the guys killing big deer on public, they're in Iowa, they're in Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, Kansas, and I post my picture and a couple people are like...
on public.
And they're like...
Not around me, anyways.
What, you just, like, why'd you shoot that deer? I'm like, I busted my ass. Like, I promise I have more sits. Like, I'm in the top 5 percentile of number of sits I had this year. Number of days spent in the field trying to hunt. And I did a lot of scouting. It made me realize that I'm going to change my tactic next year. I watched the Seek 1 video of Lee Ellis hunting his crazy deer out in Ohio. And how he did it. He started in January, like, glassing and then cameras. And, like, that's something I've never, like, typically I don't really scout until June or July. I'm like, this year I'm going to have every camera I have out in the woods at the beginning of May. I'm going to do it during turkey season. And start finding, I'm going to cast a wide net with cameras in, like, one piece of public. Go check them at the end of the month of May. If I have deer developing or a buck developing that I'm like is good, I'll try and hone in on that deer. If it's a bust, I'm going to move and give myself time to fail in that area. And then apply, like, go out, pull all the cameras, go to a different area, and keep casting nets. Because I want to find one deer. I've never done it. I want to find one deer that I really want to kill. Maybe 2. I have an A and a B on public. And just spend all my time trying to kill that deer.
I had mine this year. Never caught up to them.
And, like, I've always blipped pictures of deer, but I've never felt like I've hunted that deer. Like, I still have other spots where I'm like, I could go here.
I've never been at a point in my hunting career really until this year where it's been like, I'm going to pass a 128-inch buck, and, my number one's this giant. I've always been like, okay, there's a really good one on camera, but there's a decent one on camera too. I'd probably kill the decent one. Now I'm finally to the point where it's like, okay, I'm after the biggest deer in the area,
I'm going to set my goal for next year right now, and it's been on my mind, is that I want to kill on public in Wisconsin, I don't want to say north of Highway 8, within 4 miles of Highway 8 or north, 145-inch deer. And I'm going tag, like, eat the tag or not next year, because I filled it this year. Like, I don't need to just shoot a deer to shoot a deer.
Yeah.
I could do that with a gun. For some reason, gun season, I don't care. It's just to shoot deer.
See, gun season has gotten more and more fun for me and I know you're gonna say it's because of where we've been able to hunt the last couple of years, but like that gun hunt I went on in Kentucky.
You still had a blast.
It was a blast. Even though I only went the first morning, like that was so much fun. Like I would think it'd be fun for you, and if we could figure out a way to make it work and justify you buying a $300 tag, it'd be fun for you and somebody else to come down, and we make like a long weekend. We go down and scout one day, and that was a blast. That piece of public's cool.
I would even consider if you would be up for it, like driving further west, like maybe an hour and a half or something, and just try and camp for 4 days or something.
Well, it's just if you were going to do it that time of the year, that's what's nice. That's what I was thinking about was nice about that hunt is it's at a time of the year where you're not missing being somewhere else.
Correct, yeah.
You know what I mean? And what's hard is it's a quota hunt. So it's only that piece of public or that piece of public and the other one attached to it. So like they don't all have quota hunts. That's what's hard. So, but yeah, we could look at it. I mean, I honestly thought that was a blast. And I had never been to that piece. I literally picked a spot on a map, walked in that morning. That spot didn't pan out. It was taking me too long to get there, and so I picked a different spot on the fly and saw a couple deer. And
more deer than you had seen most of the year.
Yeah. And who knows, if I'd have set up 20 yards up the hill, I might have killed one. I don't know. I had an unknown that was a bigger bodied deer come in. I didn't even have my gun in the tree yet. It was like 2 minutes after light. So I think it could have been a buck. But
so
anyways.
If we want to forecast to next year, I don't want to say I had too many tags this year, but for the time that I had too many tags.
It's hard when you don't have enough, and it's hard when you have too many that you can't zero in on one thing.
I had 4 tags. Next year, I'm not going to go to Minnesota. What I am going to do is I am going to draw that Wyoming tag, which I don't want to say it's a guaranteed, but for the unit it is. It's so easy, and you're not going to kill a giant, but you're gonna kill deer, and that's mid-October. I have hopefully what I think is enough points in Iowa to draw my bow tag, and I think that's what I want to do. And if I don't draw, I have 2 tags, and that is what it is. I can focus on Wisconsin. Otherwise, 3 tags max next year, and it would be, hunt Wisconsin as hard as I can in September. October, you get the first weekend. The next weekend would be my Wyoming hunt, and then all of end of October, November, I would just try and take as many 3-day weekends to Iowa as I possibly can, and throw all my eggs in that basket. But that's my plan for next year, and but if I don't draw the tag, then I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
But the hard part is that like Wyoming's tag and Iowa, they both do like May 31st, so you have to apply for both to give yourself a chance. I only have like a 60% chance of drawing my Iowa tag. So, but my luck, it'll be like, oh, well, maybe I won't draw, but I'll just try, and I'll get both tags again.
Yeah.
Which it is what it is, but I don't know. I'm set that I'm tired of waiting on Iowa, because every year I wait, it just keeps getting more expensive, and I'm going to bow hunt Iowa once, and then after that, I will go gun hunt there every other year.
Yeah.
I watch the hunting public videos during gun season, and it looks so fun because they go down with, you get buddies that come up, and most people don't realize that, or maybe it's not talked about, but anywhere in the state of Iowa, you can draw a gun tag at least every other year, if not with 0 preference points. And it doesn't have to be shotgun. You can choose first shotgun, second shotgun, or late season muzzleloader.
Oh,
I think I would go late season muzzleloader.
Late season. I know a guy that went late season muzzleloader every year. Mm. We played college golf together, and he has killed a couple of giants there.
Yeah, and everybody's done hunting.
Yeah,
but you're talking their late season muzzleloader is Christmas until like the 3rd week in January.
Yeah,
which, nobody's in the woods. So even in Iowa, it gets cold.
Yeah,
it's not like you're not probably seeing negatives the entire time, but single digits to teens and 20 degrees. Like that's what we're used to here in December. But if I was gonna go solo, I'd draw a muzzleloader tag. If I had a group of like 4 or 5 guys that were like, oh, let's go hunt, I think I'd do a shotgun hunt just so we could do some drives. And
yeah, I didn't know that about Iowa.
Yeah, no, bow hunting, it's like, I've been waiting 5 years, and I thought this was going to, this is hopefully my year, but if I don't draw, that's 6 years on a bow tag, dude.
Yeah, like, that's a long
it's
time.
It's $80 a preference point. It's like $800 for the freaking tag or whatever. Like, you're going to have well over $1,000 into a whitetail, not including the gas and time.
Yeah.
Like, once you get the tag, but...
Yeah, I would agree with you though. My season feels like kind of a failure.
Which is weird because I killed my biggest buck, but like, I don't know what it was. It was a weird year. It's really hard to put into terms. Like, I obviously got down there late. I didn't have the luxury of scouting in June or July, but I had more bucks on camera that none of them, pre-October, none of them were giants, but I had more bucks on camera that were between 115 and 140 inches than I've ever had before anywhere. Like, so many deer, and they wouldn't daylight, or finally they would daylight after a long stint of not, and I'd be in the wrong spot. I'd be in a spot where I didn't have nighttime or daytime pictures of them, or they would daylight in a spot where I didn't for a long time. And then all of a sudden, late October, I had a giant show up, and then mid-November I had another giant show up. I'm talking 150
there's a
class deer.
12.
Yeah. And I never saw that many deer.
No, you went so many sits where you were jacked up, and we were talking about the game plan. Ben would call me. We'd be on Onyx together, sharing pins, sharing screens over FaceTime, talking about a game plan. And okay, you're going to see deer. Like, the spot's too good not to. And then he'll sit, bunch of deer sign, no deer. And this happened how many times? A dozen?
A ton. And it was weird. So this piece where I had the majority of these buck pictures was like 300 acres, 320 maybe. Mm-hmm. And just like over the course of the year, I told you before I went and sat Saturday, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to this spot because it's the one spot I haven't gone. Like, I've sat in every region of this piece, and it was all just the same. I don't know. So, as far as next year goes, I don't know what I'm going to do. We need to talk about Wyoming, if that's still an option for me.
It is.
I would like to go, but part of me also just really wants to kill something in Ohio or Kentucky and like put all my eggs into that basket for a year.
You only need 5 days. Season opens October 15th. At the end of day 5, we'll have 3 tags filled.
Yeah, that's true.
Can't promise they're big, but we can go out and shoot deer.
Yeah, that's true. But my main goal is to focus on finding some private to get permission on. As far as whether I prefer it's in Ohio or Kentucky, I don't really care. I don't think private probably makes that much of a difference between the two.
Oh, sure.
But if I don't get private, I'm for sure hunting Ohio next year. I'll keep the Kentucky pieces in my back pocket just because I know there's a couple of big bucks around. I just haven't figured out how to hunt them. So,
I would think with some of the how you describe some of that stuff being so thick on top of those ridges, like maybe in March, dude, just go like blow up the spots that you wouldn't ever want to walk in with a stand on your back. Like when it's just you, like, and see if you can find a lot of beds. See if you can, because I'm like debating if like those deer on your cameras are passerbys where they're just showing up from somebody else's property, going through the property, or if there's actually a spot there where deer are living.
I think there's got to be
They
a
would
spot
have
where
to
they're
be.
living.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I don't think you found it yet.
I've found there's been like a spot or two where I'm like, okay, there's a bed. I can see a buck bedding there, but yeah, not a crazy amount. But well, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, that's gonna wrap up this December podcast. So we'll have this posted. You guys have yourself a Merry Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yep, Happy Hanukkah.
I gotta piss so freaking bad. You can wrap this up.
And yeah, maybe if Ben and I get ice fishing before New Year's, him and I will be able to maybe talk about a little fishing podcast. Otherwise, this coming winter time, as much as we can get together and do some podcasts, we'll probably talk some strategies, maybe do some shed hunting, some stuff like that. But thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time.